Well, should we start? I think it's time to start. All right. Welcome, you guys. This is number 2, Goodyear Podcast. This is a show in which we roll the dice and choose a random year in history. And at the end of last episode, we chose 919.
Roll the fucking dice.
We roll the dice.
The year 919.
Yeah. You guys have told me that you guys struggled to find it. Do you guys...
It was really tough. I mean, when you use Wikipedia as your main source of information...
Yeah, but also, like...
It's pretty tough to find out.
But it's also, like, you know, what sources for medieval scholarship are available to us, right? There's none. The whole thing that I was thinking in the process of this is how amazing must it be to, like, be a citizen of a country like Britain or, like, Scandinavia or something where that medieval history has such... big ramifications for like your everyday experience that you actually focus on it. Like the American sort of educational treatment of history is very much centered around like our colonial period because that's like the origins of our nation. But we don't think about the Middle Ages because we're part of this new world that wasn't really affected by it.
Yeah, I mean, when we rolled 919...
I mean, we are affected by it.
I have no idea because my concept of history is like essentially the Renaissance to now. Like,
yeah.
American history is taught as like, well, the foundation of Americanism is like in the Renaissance, and then the founding fathers took those ideas and then brought them into the modern world of their own, which was like the 1700s. Mm-hmm. But history is also moving so fast. Thinking about 1,000 years ago is like super difficult to just wrap your head around because it's a totally different world. I mean, like the stories that I was reading about, it was hard to wrap my head around like what this combat was actually like.
Well, yeah, and you look at the names, and the names don't really make sense because they don't exist half the time.
Yeah.
Countries are different shapes. It's hard to even relate to any of it.
I started researching on stuff that was in Europe, and I was like, man, this is really hard because it's like nations I don't know versus nations I don't know in countries that don't exist. And I was just like, it was super hard to wrap my head around it. And I ended up finding stories from China, and that's the stuff I brought to share.
Oh, really? Well, that's good, because I didn't look that up at all.
Yeah, I was actually asking you guys, trying to like gauge for like where were you going, kind of hoping that we weren't going to overlap.
I figured Zach thought of like the Byzantine Empire, because you really get rumpy humpy for that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I really like the Byzantines, but I didn't do the Byzantines. Are we introducing our topics?
Sure.
Go for it.
So wait, so you did...
I did China. What did you do?
Interesting. I did... So I thought that I could cheat and just watch The Last Kingdom and... and
no, this is before the Crusades.
And just summarize... No, you're thinking of Kingdom of Heaven. There's a really good show made by BBC on Netflix called The Last Kingdom, and it's about...
That's the Viking one that you showed me?
It's Vikings, but no, it's about sub-Roman England. So it's about the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms resisting the Danish invasion and it's about Alfred the Great, who actually is the generation just before 919. Huh. So I looked at that and I said, oh, it's a little too far off. I mean, some of the events, like I'm going to talk about Alfred a little bit, but it's Alfred's successor, his son, Edward the Elder, who is the important one. He's actually doing stuff in 919. He's actually fighting wars and stuff in Britain and sort of solidifying the Anglo-Saxon hegemony in Britain at that time, which doesn't go away until the Norman conquest, like 100 years later. So, yeah, it's a little interesting.
Okay.
But there's one particular...
when you say sub-Roman, maybe I'm sorry if I'm a little lost, but when you say sub-Roman England, where is that now?
Basically south of Scotland, south of Hadrian's Wall.
Oh, okay.
So the Romans ruled... Britannia was the province ruled by the Romans, and it basically is Britain except Scotland because they couldn't fuck with the Picts. And so they built a wall. And all of that area was Romanized for like 4 centuries, like a pretty long time. And actually, like, yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about Roman Britain because it's super important to their sense of actually being a place rather than just an island with a bunch of little like squabbling tribes on it.
By 919 is England, does it have a single identity or is it chaos?
It's kind of chaos, but it has more of an identity than it's ever had before because of the Romanization.
But because it was Rome before and it wasn't England, and then Rome left and it still kind of held its own like single nature. Is that what you mean?
So yeah, exactly. I guess maybe I should just jump right in because you're
This is,
you're asking me questions now.
Totally.
So again, like I mentioned previously, but I'm going to say it for the show too, is when unless you are a really like specified kind of scholar, like looking up the Middle Ages for the layman is really hard. And like I found myself going like, oh, there's got to be just one cool thing that happened in 919 that I can talk about. And it was like, no, a bunch of shit was happening from like 870 to like the year 1000, and like 919 is somewhere in there. So I ended up kind of talking about all these marginal events and just focusing on like shifting like demographics and stuff that really ultimately led to the Norman conquest. But that's the big twist in the story.
Yeah. From what you said earlier, I agree with that, because Charlemagne like became a thing in the 1800s, and then after
1800s or 800s?
800s, excuse me. And that was before this. And then after this was 1066 when the Normans took over Britain. So this is like a weird...
It's a weird, like,
in between big history events.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of difficult to find out this stuff.
Yeah. So, and again, like, I feel like I have to do the Dan Carlin qualifier of like, not a historian.
Oh, obviously.
You know? Obviously. I'm drinking whiskey and doing my best. Yeah. But we
got a degree.
I got a degree in I did my 4 years. I'm better than most, but
as if we were fooling anyone.
Oh, guys, we didn't do the song. No, keep going. Keep going.
I think we should do the song.
People love the song. People, you're the only person in America.
I didn't want to start talking until we did that song.
America loves the song, Brian.
You want to sing 1872 again, or you want to sing 919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 9919, 10th century. 1919. All right. It can't go on forever.
Woo!
Keep going.
All right.
Wow,
now
really,
I feel...
That was like a stretch.
Yeah, that's nice. It was like, now I feel ready to do the show, frankly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. 919. I'll set the stage.
Look at you. You're doing already so much better than last time.
It's 100% improvement from last. Wow. Come so far.
Yeah, you're doing it, bud.
I still have Wikipedia open in my lap, but it's the best I could do in 2 days of preparation for this. So,
well, we had 3 weeks, but you know.
Well, I took 2 days.
Look, I only counted the last 2 when I stopped procrastinating.
You go on Wikipedia.
I did the best I could in 3 weeks. I worked for 2 afternoons.
You check Wikipedia immediately, and then you're like, oh, this isn't working out. And then you go back 2 weeks later to see if anyone posted any new shit. And you're like, oh, there's still nothing.
No, there's been no updates on Edward the Elder. Yeah, so, well, you know what's interesting about this stuff is that a lot of it comes from this, like, obscure-ass text just called the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And it's almost like a farmer's almanac of like events and like accomplishments of, as far as I can tell. That's probably a horrible analogy for anyone who knows anything about this, but for me, it looked like, because they would refer to it in the past, like historians would refer to it and be like, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle set, like it was like they had one big thing a year kind of thing of like that a king did, and it was like, oh, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says that, you know, the Danish submitted to Edward on this year, and it's like, but that's widely disputed because this was just like, you know, fucking random people just writing like, oh, this thing happened and whatever. So yeah, so there is a compendium of like a vague timeline, but a lot of it is just that. It's very vague, because there was really no scholarship happening at this point in time. It was just like
I mean, this is the Dark Ages, as we call it, right?
Yeah,
like,
scholarship in
like
Britain had basically imploded. And yeah, and in between, because there was no institution supporting it. And that's the interesting thing, is that in the empire, in the Roman Empire at least, like, there was a whole intellectual class. Like, good example is like Virgil. Like, there were poets who were employed by the emperor to like write the story of Rome, and it was propagandistic, but it was like poetry was essentially subsidized by the state in ancient Rome. And it was very important because that was, you know, there were like 10 writers, you know, it wasn't like today
like where literally who could write.
Right. Maybe. But there were like, no, but there were very strict codes as to, and I'm getting into my own specialty now, but there were very strict codes, of like what constituted. Stop. Just stop. You guys are bullies. I have a degree. God damn it.
Oh, yeah.
No, but not codes, but there were very like rigid ideas as to what Roman like proper poetry was, and very few people could do it well. It was like there were few people because the possibilities were so narrow. Whereas now it's like, at least in the contemporary world, and this is my last digression into this, poetry is very concerned with like identity politics, and anyone can write about who they are.
Talking about then or now?
Now.
But then
it was all about people who could like write like myths, basically.
History,
like,
stories. It was the method of storytelling, so you could remember it because it was, if it had structure,
oral
it was
tradition.
easier to remember.
Yeah, and it was also like Virgil essentially the Romans plagiarized a lot from the Greeks to like solidify their like Hellenic identity kind of, and to be they wanted to inherit that rich culture of the East that Alexander's empire had left behind. Like all the wealthiest cities, and you might touch on this with the Byzantines, is the reason the Byzantines lasted like 1,200 years longer than the Western Romans is that all the money was in the East, because those cities in like Palestine, in Egypt are so old and so rich that like the seat of power being in Constantinople, it was just fabulous. There was just like when Carl Sagan talks about the library at Alexandria, just like fabulous wealth, supporting scholarship, supporting progress, supporting technology. And the West just didn't really have that. The West was like the playground of politicians hoping to advance their career, which is why Britain was acquired in the first place, which is where I will begin.
You've already he's going to fucking begin.
Yeah, no, he's going to begin. He hasn't even started.
Ooh, I better pour myself some.
Yeah, pour me some of that. All right. So, oh no, that's not coming through the recording, is it?
No, it's not.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that.
No one wants to get advertised to. Yeah, so that's what I mean, is like the origins of this stuff go so far back, right? Like why I found myself going down this Wikipedia rabbit hole of like, why was Britain even important? Like, why did the Romans even want it?
Yeah.
And the only answer anyone has is that Julius Caesar thought it would be cool to go to Britain, and so Caesar had already conquered Gaul. But basically, at least as I understand his situation, Caesar had conquered Gaul, but like he wasn't exactly welcome back in Rome. So for all intents and purposes, he was kind of making his own Roman kingdom in France to try to like consolidate his power, because Rome was like, oh fuck, this Caesar guy's dangerous. He's getting too strong. He just conquered half the known world in like 3 weeks, right? So like
Conquered.
Yeah, like we don't want him back. So he couldn't go back to Rome for whatever reason, just because he wasn't welcome, or because he thought maybe they had already, the other guys in the triumvirate maybe had already positioned armies to stop him. There's the famous cross where he crosses the Rubicon, which I don't really know that much about, like when Caesar re-enters Rome. But essentially the conditions for Caesar coming back to Rome and consolidating his authority were not ready yet. And he was just kind of kicking around in Gaul, being like, what can I do? You know, and he looked across.
When is this?
This is like 54 BC, right? So he looks across the channel and he sees Britain and he's like, oh, I bet there's some like silver and shit over there. So he brings 2 legions over and they kill a bunch of tribal people. And then he puts a Belgican, which is like Romanized Belgium area, puts a Belgican king in charge of this tribe called the Atrabanes or whatever, and is like, okay, now you're like a Roman client state or whatever. And his victory like impresses all the people in the Senate, and he basically goes back.
Are you about to tell us the whole story from 54 BC to 919?
It's important.
No.
Don't stop me.
Okay.
Let the man finish.
Don't stop me.
The man's bringing us on a journey here.
Are you enjoying the journey? I feel like Brian's not enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
I'm just a little lost. I'm sorry to say.
I like Julius Caesar. He's a interesting guy.
Maybe that's my fault that I'm lost. I just don't know enough of this to
I know it.
to be on the same page. Like I feel like I'm getting a lot of information that is like
I'm just quietly
too
enjoying
much.
it.
Yeah.
I like it.
But
How do you feel, America? Is it too much?
To go back to what you said earlier about Britain and like why did they have it? Why did the Romans have it? Well, I know that London was actually essentially a vacation spot for a lot of veterans of the war. They would literally move there with their families and just like, oh, we've done it.
Yeah.
We're just living here now.
Why would they move out of the beautiful Mediterranean to London?
Because they still had it, because the trade routes were so good that they'd still get everything they wanted. They still had the bathhouses. They still had all the
They're like, oh, it's lovely. There's fog. Have you ever seen fog before?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. I know that London always was a Roman city and always has been. So that's been very important, like I said, to the British identity. So, so the Romans go over. Julius Caesar thought there was stuff of worth there. Didn't really find anything, but was like, I'm going to take this because I'm fucking Julius Caesar, right? So then it becomes a Roman province for like 500 years, like something crazy, you know? And during that time, Britain and basically most of Europe was like Celtic, right? Or variations of the Celts. During that time, the Romans start intermarrying with Celts, like traditional Celtic speaking people, and they produce this like subculture called the Brythons. And it becomes a different language, which is the Celtic language and the Pict language mixed in with Latin.
And Pict is the Northern the
Pict
Scottish.
is the Scots, yeah, and the Hebride, the Highland people.
Is that Braveheart?
Yeah.
Okay.
They could never be.
I haven't seen Braveheart, but
is that Braveheart? I
Is
just
that
want to
Mel
know
Gibson?
for myself.
Wait. So Mel Gibson and Caesar.
So Mel Gibson and Caesar.
You want some peanut M&Ms?
So basically, yeah, the Picts, the Highland people, were never directly controlled by Rome, which is why, thousands of years later, Scotland still has this kind of independent identity, because they don't see themselves as being part of this Roman British like national identity. And that's what's important about the Roman occupation, is that it took a bunch of these like probably like hundreds of Celtic tribes and essentially homogenized them into this Roman Britannian mix of people with their own distinct language called Brythonic or Brittonic, and they became known as the Britons, right? So, which is a derivative of that, subculture, a derivative name for that subculture. So,
when I do this, just ignore me.
Okay.
Because I need to reset the cameras.
What year are we in now? Like 500?
So now we're in. So we just jumped forward 500 years. So I promise I'm making this quick.
All right. So what's going on is we got Romans mixing with native Britons, so like Gaelics. It's kind of
mixing with Celts, which creates Britons.
That's yeah. And then we get the fucking Saxons coming in,
right?
And they're Nordic and Germanic, so
right.
Or one or the other.
So that's the thing is that this sense of, and also like not only are they creating this culture, but of course the Romans are building roads, they're building cities, they're building castles.
It's like if the red peanut M&Ms were
mixing with
Saxons, and then the blue peanut M&Ms were the natives, and then the orange peanut M&Ms were the Romans. And then they just all fucking killed each other and raped and shit. and then you just get a bag of peanut M&Ms. And it's just a whole mix.
And that's England.
Yeah. I like that.
Basically. So,
and that's how their language works.
Got a peanut M&M in my mouth. Maybe I shouldn't chew into the microphone.
No, that's fine.
So anyway, so now there's this national sense of Britain as a Roman province. So around like 400 AD, shit starts going bad for the Western Roman Empire. And basically, this is really interesting. They have, I think, 3 legions guarding Britannia. And those legions all of a sudden stop getting paid because the emperor, I think his name was Honorius, the last emperor of Rome, the guy who ruled from like 410 to 470.
Oh, the last emperor was Romulus, actually.
Oh, Romulus.
It was
wow.
ironic.
What a full circle.
Yeah. Roman
Founded
Empire
by Romulus.
In 476 AD.
Okay, so it was the emperor before Romulus. It was Romulus's predecessor. Shit starts falling apart, and I think the Huns and like some Asiatic people are pushing in to the west and fucking shit up. Because the Germans are affected by this too, and this is going to play into the story. So essentially Roman rule starts breaking down in Britannia because Emperor Honorius stops importing currency. He stops importing Roman coinage, and by like 420 something, it just dries up. And there's no money.
There's no money.
There's no money.
There's currency scarcity.
Money.
There's currency scarcity because they stop importing Roman coins.
Or use Bitcoin
so,
are they using anything else, or is there just...
Well, what happens is, imagine you're on an island, and they dump a bag of coins, right? For simplicity, they drop a bag of coins in the middle of you and all your friends, and everyone kind of scrambles to get some, right? I mean, this is how it worked. I mean, like, stuff goes through traders, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
the currency gets there. And so, and now, here, the M&Ms, right? You all grab your M&Ms, and then there's no more M&Ms.
Right.
So people have kind of the wealth that they have, and they've consolidated it. And of course, like the wealthy merchants and stuff like that have more.
Is there no foreign trade? What do you mean they stopped importing currency?
They stopped using, they basically just shut off the currency. So
turn that shit off.
So the Romans just said, like, we got bigger problems going on in like Germany right now because all these like hostile tribes are pushing in.
Pull out of it, it's hard for me to understand.
Yeah, so the bank, there wasn't really a Roman bank. It was all kind of, I mean, there was, but it was all kind of controlled by, it was the imperial authority of Rome. So the Roman emperor basically said, like, we can't afford to keep paying for Britannia. And his way of expressing that was just like, but he didn't want to let it go. It wasn't like today, like we're, our experience with decolonization is like post World War II, where they're just kind of like, okay, we can't afford to keep paying for Zanzibar, so like we're gonna have them hold an election and we'll figure it out and we'll wean ourselves off. This is kind of the first time that's ever happened. So the Roman Empire is like, well, fuck, we don't want to lose that territory, but we really can't keep sending coinage up there because
so they
we
were
can't afford it.
You're not saying that they stopped supporting the currency, but they stopped paying for public services.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the imperial authority in Britain just tanks, right? Because it would be like, it's like the United States and Puerto Rico, basically. It's like their little island territory. And
Or imagine we just stopped sending any sort of federal funds to Hawaii.
exactly, nothing.
Did they keep taxing them? Or did they say, nope, you're good, you're done?
I'm not sure exactly. All I know is that a big...
If you were being taxed and you didn't get any federal funds, you'd be furious.
Right.
I don't know if it would even be possible.
Yeah.
How would you even pay the taxes?
Right.
Right.
Well, because you're still maybe using Roman or U.S. currency, but you're just not benefiting from the federal system.
Right.
Imagine you're Hawaii, you're still using the U.S. dollar and trading in it, and you're still paying federal income tax, but they're not sending you any federal aid. All of your state schools fall apart. All of your federally funded like community centers fall apart. Anything federally funded just falls apart.
So that's a really interesting point, Brian. I don't know if that's how the Roman bureaucracy was structured, but they might have still been exacting taxes from their subjects because they were thinking like, oh, we'll bounce back.
We can still get it.
Right. We might as well like, keep shit going until we can like start importing. Maybe the stopping importing currency was just part of like just a temporary plan to like kind of ease off, but there was still imperial authority and they might have still been collecting taxes, which would explain why the powerful nobles there got pissed, because there's a bunch of rebellions and this and that and the other thing. And now with these rebellions, the Romans are really fucked because the Roman legions,
who are the soldiers?
Who are the soldiers holding order, are now refusing to work because they're not getting paid. Because there's no Roman money.
Right.
The only thing of value in the empire, the Roman currency, is not coming up to Britain.
Wow, imagine you're Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, every soldier is just like, nope, sorry, we don't care about you anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You're done.
So the Roman legions actually rebel. And there is a pretender emperor, Constantine III, who takes the rebel army. It's kind of like Spain in the Spanish Civil War, where Franco like took the army in Morocco and then invaded Spain. The British legions, or the legions in Britannia, come under the control of this usurper emperor named Constantine III, and he takes the legions across the channel and invades Gaul, which is still controlled by Rome. And he eventually gets defeated or something, but now basically there's no army in Rome.
They've pulled out of Gaul too?
No. He gets defeated in Gaul.
Okay. The Constantine III.
Constantine III, the pretender emperor. But he's taken the army out of Britain and gotten it destroyed.
And then got destroyed.
Yeah. So now there's no imperial, there's no money, there's no army, and Britain is, and whatever Romans, puppets of the Roman Empire that are left in Britain are not getting paid, and they're not getting anything. So they're just like, all the tax collectors and shit are just like, fuck, I'm out. Like everyone just leaves.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the Romans are like, fuck that. That's over. That game's done.
Yeah.
Or they just settle down and assimilate and kind of swear off their Romanism. But anyway.
But if you have high vested interest in the Roman system, I mean, imagine you're a banker in American currency in Hawaii when America pulls out and you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to go set up shop in anywhere else but Hawaii.
So that leads to, all of these kind of different people rising up and kind of creating their own little kingdoms, their own little states, because there's wealthy Romans there who still have an interest in like being there. and they kind of established these landed estates there. So now there's all these little, so, you know, within 100 years or so, all these little tiny kingdoms emerge.
Is that like the beginning of a monarchy system? Like
Sort of.
like a regional kind of like monarchy struggle?
Feudalism.
Feudal struggles?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because when the imperial authority vanishes, what's left? I mean, imagine the United States government falls tomorrow. Who's going to run East Hampton? Probably the guy who can
Eric
afford.
Sewer. Eric Sewer's going to dominate.
Eric Sewer.
He's our king.
Yeah, probably the guy who
Or
can,
Sean's boss.
the guy who has a bunch of businesses.
He'd run Long Meadow.
Yeah, he'd run as much of Western Mass as he probably could.
Yeah. Probably the guy with a bunch of money who can afford an army to protect people, who can afford to keep public utilities going, blah, blah, blah. And of course, this isn't happening overnight. This is happening over decades, right?
Sure.
So things are falling apart. The Romans, before 476, when shit really hits the fan, the Romans still try to control Britain, but the legions aren't there anymore, because they rebelled, and now what's left of them has been reassembled and brought back south to fight Attila the Hun or some shit like that. So they're trying to consolidate everything in defense of Italy. And so what they end up doing is employing mercenaries from Saxony and Jutland. And all these Saxon mercenaries immigrate to southern Britain, set up camp, and establish settlements. They bring their families, they bring their wives, families marry families, kids, blah, blah, blah. Then when shit really goes bad, all of a sudden these mercenaries are living in towns, and there's these all German, all Saxon towns along the southern coast that are just there now.
Yep.
And they're like, fuck, like, there's no authority here anymore. We're just going to take this. So then the Saxons start conquering England and pushing the Britons essentially up towards Ireland, and the Celts, right? So that's how we get Anglo-Saxon England. And it sets up, you know, these, like I said, these like landed estates that are employing these mercenaries. They gradually become like Saxonized, sort of. So what is a Saxon versus a Breton? Like, a Saxon is from Germany. So and from Denmark and stuff. So all these like Danish and German people who were employed by Rome as military people are there having kids, having babies, and suddenly they become like the military arm of the nobles who are left there, and then they become like the ethnic majority. Like within a couple hundred years. So by like the 700s, you have like a Saxon identity fighting with the Briton identity, and they essentially just take over. So and even the kingdoms that are still essentially Roman British just start Saxonizing. They just start assimilating because they're like, we don't want to fuck with the Saxons. Like, we're just going to become Saxons. We're going to claim we're Saxons. We're going to change our names. And over the course of, you know, you start transitioning from names like, here we go, like Ethelfeld to names like Edvard, right? Which are like Norse names almost. So that's how you end up with these kingdoms. So basically after that, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms solidify, and you have like, I think like 7 kingdoms. You have Mercia, Wessex, and those are really the 2 important ones. So yeah, you have like 7 or 8 kingdoms that are all kind of, you know.
I don't know why I'm putting this.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to get it out of your shot.
This boy keeps touching my whiskey and moving
trying to
around.
Put it out of your face, but then
Yeah.
because I just imagined this like big red thing, like right in, I don't know.
Just like he had the little boy.
I liked the little. I liked McBoozer in front of you.
McBoozer.
I don't think I would like the Maker's Mark bottle as much.
Yeah, well, maybe we can get a sponsorship from
Maker's Mark.
Yeah, we've tried this before with many other things.
Doritos and Daniel's Day Lewis.
Doritos Day Lewis.
Yeah.
Was
I'll get the McBoozer out next time, and you will stop complaining.
I will.
So you've been all Saxoned up. How's your sax? Is it good?
You want to take a break? Even if you got more, you want to let
you
Sean
want to stop right before you get to 9:19?
I think I can blow through it.
Let's get
if y'all are still ready.
Keep going.
Yeah, I know I've talked a lot, but
I think that's how this show is going to go, though.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's like I was saying. It's so hard to find specific things of importance because you know so little about the characters too.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, so like a couple things were happening in 919, but so anyway, so we end up with all these bunches of kingdoms and that are Anglo-Saxon, and then all of a sudden more Norse people start invading England. Not really clear why. Maybe they thought that they could just because like the Roman Empire had collapsed and like now there's no like organized resistance. In the same way the Saxons just kind of like skittled their way in. Yeah.
We're getting in.
So I think all these Germans who are being displaced by Asiatic peoples who are moving in on the former Roman territories. I mean, there's massive displacements of people in this period because essentially the most powerful country in the world has collapsed. You know,
huge vacuum. All these tribes doing stuff.
All these tribes moving. Whatever. I don't know the details of it, but all these Vikings essentially these Danish Vikings start attacking England and trying to take over these kingdoms that exist, and they're doing a pretty fucking good job. They come in, they terrorize people, they destroy towns, they rape everybody, and basically the only Anglo-Saxon kingdom left not under Danish control is Wessex.
Where's that in the European island?
It's London, basically.
Okay.
It's the Thames Valley and southern England. So the Vikings are coming in and fucking shit up and kind of just like making England Danish, which is really interesting because if you look at the geography of Europe, kind of makes sense. It almost is part of that little North Sea archipelago. So geographically, they're just like, oh, look over there. There's probably some shit over there we can take, right? And also, like, Denmark is not the best place to, like, have a farm. Like, it's not terribly fertile place. It's, like, low fens and, like, shitty soil and stuff. So all these guys who are being displaced anyway, or maybe they're just trying their fortunes out in other places. So they get war bands together, they go over. Long story short, by the 800s, we're almost to 919, England is overrun by Danes. And the only kingdom holding out is Wessex. And that's, they're ruled by this king named Alfred, who later is known as Alfred the Great because he successfully resists the Danish invaders and actually manages to take back some of the kingdoms that they've conquered and like fuck them up in battle, which is crazy because everyone's afraid of Vikings. And so he ends up, these Vikings who are displacing Britons and Anglo-Saxons, he ends up displacing them again. And some of them move across the channel to Normandy and Brittany. And settle there. So basically, long story short, Alfred defeats the Danish, blah, blah, blah. Now,
long story short, you know, we're getting
now in
long story longer.
Yeah, long story longer, 919. Here we are.
Oh, shit.
We've arrived. 919. Boy, oh boy. What a journey it's been.
Yeah, that's a really good journey, you know?
So in 919, the ruler of Wessex, which now, because the Danes have fucked up everybody else, Wessex is the dominant Anglo-Saxon house because the competition's been destroyed. So they're basically in a position of just like, well, we just have to defeat the Danes and all the other English people will submit to us because we're liberating. They're in a liberator's position.
Right.
So they're just fighting these continual, probably like 100-year-long, I mean, they're separate wars, but they're kind of always fighting the Danes and always sort of slowly pushing them back and like assimilating them, blah, blah, blah. So now Alfred the Great's son, Edward the Elder, is on the throne. And he conquers this kind of southern kingdom called Danelaw, or whatever. He conquers Danelaw and he expands Wessex into the Midlands, kicks a bunch of ass, builds a bunch of castles. And then the Mercians, which is the other major kingdom. It was like Wessex was kind of the only one left, but Mercia was still really strong, even though they had submitted to the Danish. Now that the Danish are kind of retreating, Mercia sees its opportunity to come back, and they rebel in the parts of Mercia that are controlled by Wessex. And a big rebellion happens, and he has to fight this rebellion. And that's what's going on in Britain from like 917 to 920. So in the middle of this rebellion, Edward the Elder is fighting, and he's going to battles, and he's putting his life at risk, and he has no male heir. So he thinks, oh shit. He's like, I gotta figure this out before I get killed in a battle or something.
Find a lady.
Right. He's like, I've been too busy fucking the Danes, fucking with the Danes to like figure out the domestic side of my rule. I'm pretty sure that's what the deal was. I think he had no male heir.
Just pretend that he did, I guess, because at this point, I don't want to.
I liked it, the fact that he might have,
that he might have had an heir and he just didn't know.
Yeah,
or that he might have.
I want to think that right now.
It just seems like if you're a king, how do you not have a male heir in the days of contraception?
They must have just looped all over the place.
I mean, unless this king was like a closet homosexual and he was only fucking guys, I don't believe he didn't have a male heir, because like I imagine you just have like hundreds of children at this point in history if you're a king.
Yeah, because 9 of them would die, and you're like, oh, I'm still good.
Yeah, you got 10 kids because you had 90 who didn't make it through through infancy.
Yeah,
yeah,
90 who died. They all died.
I mean, it's just like, it just seems like if you're a king, like I mean, maybe my impression of kings in the 10th century is a little off, but I imagine you're just like strolling through anywhere, and you get just a twinkle in your eye, and you're like, hi.
If you're the king, you can fuck anything.
Not even in like a rapey way, but just like,
hi, I'm a god.
I'm literally the coolest person you've ever seen, because A, I'm educated, B, I can ride a horse, C, I can shoot arrows, and D, I can swing a sword, and I can make anything you could ever dream about come true. And my clothes are more expensive than your entire life savings. Like,
yeah. Okay, so actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. He didn't. Sorry, guys. Just for accuracy, he didn't lack a male heir. What happened was because he was, winning so much because Wessex is basically becoming England, right? They are the dominant house. The Mercians rebel, try to get their shot, but he puts them down. He kills the Mercian queen. This big dramatic thing that happens around 919. And he essentially controls now. Wessex controls all of southern England, and I say southern as in south of Scotland. The Picts are still doing their own thing, but everything south of Hadrian's Wall essentially now belongs to Wessex, or is indirectly, or is a vassal of Wessex. They've consolidated power, and they've brought back the structure that the Romans had brought. There's like a British unity, which is part Saxon, because the Anglo-Saxons are the dominant like people, but like of course the Danes are submitting. All this cultural assimilation is happening, and you're seeing in 919 the first kind of emergence of an English identity. This idea of England is a thing that sort of solidifies under Edward the Elder. And he's basically become a really strong king, and all the princes and stuff on the continent, like the Franks and the Merovingians and stuff, all want to get royal ties with him. So a very unfortunately named king in France, named Charles the Simple.
It was probably relevant.
That's a decent name.
Yeah.
It could be worse.
Humble.
I've seen one. It was like Leo the Fat. And it's like, oh, that's worse. That's worse.
Leo the Fat. that.
Charles the Dumb.
Yeah. So he marries Edward's daughter in 919. They get married, which establishes this connection, which is still felt today, between England and France and Western France. These royal ties that probably are still going on today.
Yeah.
And this idea that then in the 1400s or whatever, England and France are going to fight for Western France because the English believe it's theirs, the French believe it's still theirs, whatever. So in 919, that royal marriage happens. And also remember those Saxons and German people who got displaced by Edward and Alfred's wars, who moved to Normandy across the Channel. Well, now they've been there for a couple hundred years, intermarried with French people, and now they've become the Normans, and they are controlled by a duke, or they're essentially like a little Viking kingdom, and they start attacking the French, and they besiege Paris and all this stuff. So the king, who has other concerns, I think it was Charles the Simple, says to them, look, you can have your own little kingdom. We'll call it Brittany, and we'll call it Normandy. You can have your own little area. And he kind of installs a French duke over this little weird inter-ethnic Viking kingdom on the coast. And it becomes its own little thing. And then, through some other war or whatever, the Normans become the strongest kingdom in Western France. And they start kind of challenging the authority of the French king. They're essentially stronger than the French king for 100 years. So now the Normans are there. And guess what? The Duke of Normandy has royal ties to the king, the Anglo-Saxon king of Wessex.
Well.
So now that Edward the Elder is gone, I think it's his son or his grandson at this point, is, because of that royal marriage in 919, Edward the Confessor, new Edward, who's the king of the Anglo-Saxons in Wessex, is a first cousin with William the Conqueror. And Edward the Confessor is, he's kind of getting old, and he has no male heir. So it's thought by historians that he kind of makes a gesture to William the Conqueror, hey, when I die, this place is yours, right? So either way, William the Conqueror comes over and conquers England in 1066.
Yeah,
all because of that royal marriage in 919. He was actually a legitimate contender for the throne of Wessex, because he was first cousins with Edward the Confessor, who died childless. And there we go. 919. Good year.
Switch the cameras.
Good fucking year.
Yeah.
How was that story, boys? You like that story?
J.R. Tolkien's view of this history. He thought that it was a travesty that the Normans invaded and ruined essentially Saxon history, which he thought was British history. Yeah. But if you really look at it, it's not British history. British history is before that, with the fucking essentially the ancient
Britons.
Celts.
Yeah.
That's the real British history.
Maybe
all the rest of that is just all these different voids being filled with different people.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting. He really
maybe
felt
he just
that.
thought the Anglo-Saxons were cooler.
That's essentially what it is. He thought the culture was more interesting, I think.
And it is. I mean, it's more celebrated, I think. That's an interesting point. In Britain, in contemporary Britain, I think they really celebrate their Anglo-Saxonism. I mean, what do you learn in school is Anglo-Saxon literature, Beowulf, right? And that's considered an Anglo-Saxon poem. And I think what happened And I think maybe as a result of that, which is what I was sort of talking about in this story, is that the British identity before the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex was basically little tribes. And before that, it was just a province of Rome. So the Anglo-Saxons brought the really first truly unique kind of English identity to bear. And they were also a powerful kingdom, again, able to support scholarship, able to support the arts. So it's the first time in probably hundreds of years that there's actually like British literature emerging as a result of political stability brought on by the House of Wessex, which is really cool. Like, so I think that's why
cool.
there's strong affinities to the Anglo-Saxon culture in contemporary Britain.
My impression of what you researched on was the Pope, or like the Catholic influence on this time.
Yes, it was. That's exactly what I was going to talk about.
So, like, how does that relate to? Because it seems like this whole like dynastic experience of like all these like royal marriages and things like that. Like, how did the like? I mean, because Rome pulls out, as Zach has told us, and then, as I understand it, like the Catholic Church kind of takes over the role in Western Europe as like the like institutional or like imperial infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that is interesting.
Like without some sort of system, it like the Catholic Church kind of steps up, and we like, for better or worse, like we think of the Catholic Church as being this like incredibly strong institution. But that was probably a good thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from what I've learned so far, the Catholic Church really got most of its power by the 1700s.
Okay.
That's when the popes started to actually like take control.
Huh. I think about it as way earlier than that, like Charlemagne era.
Well, before that, they were when the Romans became...
Did you say 17 or did you mean 700?
700s. I don't know. I'm probably going to say...
You keep saying 17.
You know, those are the good years, and I keep on going to those.
Okay.
But yeah, in the 700s.
Thank you.
That's when the Pope started to get some more power for real, which has progressed to modern day, essentially. Well, now it's kind of like they don't really do shit.
Right.
But yeah. And before that, in the Roman Empire... I mean, the Romans became Catholic after Constantine took control as the emperor. And then after that, it continued to be Christian. And there were popes during that time. They just had to do anything or everything under the control of the emperor of the time. So they're like, not really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
They were just there. They weren't really useful. I mean, the idea of the Pope is that it's the direct predecessor to St. Peter.
Right.
So, which I actually never knew, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that before. So they're supposed to treat the Pope as St. Peter, essentially.
Yeah.
Which
he's
was
the founder of the church.
Yeah.
In Rome. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who spread Christianity more thoroughly than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So he's
like the godhead of Catholicism.
Yeah. Yeah, so by the 700s... Do
you need a refresher on what year?
I need someone to write...
On what era we're in?
Hundreds.
Yeah. Let me just refresh you. We're in 919, 919, 919, 919, 919, 919, 919.
All right.
10th century.
Word.
All right, yeah.
So yeah,
you get that shit going on, and then by 919, there's this pope named John the 10th.
Hey, fuck that guy, right?
It's a lot of Johns.
I don't know.
We just
had John this. What was it? Pope John Paul II? Like what? 20 years ago?
Yeah. Like 90s Pope.
And back then we had Pope John the 10th. So they fucked it all up. I don't know. It's confusing. But yeah, that guy. I don't know anything about him because Wikipedia didn't tell me much. But the problem with that time is that since, like you said, after the Roman Empire, they're just like little factions of people fucking with each other. And so the Pope, after the Roman Empire, became like just a useful tool for like these Italian noble clans to try and influence people with.
Yeah.
And so they always got killed like within like 2 years. They like, all right, kill them.
Well, it's interesting that like Brian mentioned Charlemagne before, and one of the things that I remember being most interesting from like high school history class is you learn about the coronation of Charlemagne as like king of the Franks and the Holy Roman Emperor. And I mean, come on, that's like so obvious that they were trying to reconstitute the Roman Empire through the church and the Pope. And I remember this, there was like an illustration of Charlemagne being crowned by the Pope. So the Pope became the guy who sort of validated these like German kings. It was like Rome lost its imperial authority, and then they were like, oh, but we can still control shit. We can still make, if we just convert all the Germans to Christianity, we can still control them by like sending this like God figure up and being like, yeah, you're a good king. Yeah, you're one of us, right?
Yeah,
so
I got
still basically Romans. That. Yeah, there we go.
I got something to say about that.
Yeah, what do you got to say? Lay it on us.
Well, here's the thing. Charlemagne, like you said, he got crowned by the Pope of the time. I don't know which one it was, but he got crowned. So that means that the Franks, Charlemagne was the Franco Empire king, the emperor of them. And so he backed the Pope whenever the Pope needed help. And in return, the Pope was like, well, we'll help you out. And
we're essentially
you're
vassals.
Going to heaven. Woo!
Yeah, essentially vassals of the Pope.
And then Charlemagne,
who's in Italy.
He got all wise to this after who knows how many years. So he made sure that his son, his successor, crowned himself without any religion, well, the Pope being involved, any of the Catholics. So the Catholics were like, oh, no, now we lost the Franks. So they're in this limbo moment in the 900s, late 800s, and they had to figure out how they're going to like still be eligible and like make sense in the time. Like, well, we're just going to like stop being important if we don't find out how to like get military backing. So they were like, should we like go on with this noble family in Italy or this? Because they used to have the Franco army under Charlemagne to support them. And when they lost that, they were, upstream without a paddle, Mm-hmm. And this Pope in 919 was dealing with that crap. Pope John X, he was like, oh no, I need to get some alliances going. So he was talking to let's see here. Let's look at these names. The Berenger of some Italian place. But he was the Berenger, so like the king of this like Italian like city-state probably. And that guy won a really good battle against the Saracens. So this is like before the Crusades, but they're like fighting the Saracens in southern Italy.
Mm-hmm. Who were the Saracens?
They're like fucking like, I don't know, Islamic.
The Turks!
Goddamn African.
The goddamn Turks.
Indian things or something or other. Brown people.
Yeah.
And they were fighting them and they won. And then Pope John X was like fighting with them. Like he was young or something. I don't know. He was probably young.
The Pope is just leading a charge.
He was literally fighting with the Christian army. Like they had their own army, and then the Italians had their army, and they fought the Saracens, and they won. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, it was great." So he made that guy, the Berenger. That's the way he was called, Berenger the first. He made him the emperor of Italy and the Roman Empire.
Whoa!
And backed him like royally by like. He got the Pope's blessing.
In 919?
Within like 10 or 20 years of that.
Okay.
And,
so he the Holy Roman Empire? Or is he trying to like reconstitute the Italian sort of Mediterranean Empire by establishing this guy?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Maybe I'm asking a question you're not.
He's trying to get it all, man.
Yeah,
He's
okay.
trying to get them all together. He's lost the Franco Empire,
Right.
So he's trying to get the Italian, a good Italian noble empire, to work with the Pope and the papacy. And,
So he just gives this guy pretty much the ultimate title.
Yeah, he gives him a title.
He's like,
so
hey, if you're on my team, you
Yeah.
get to be emperor of all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then he's like, they beat the Saracens, and he had to go up and fight like the Magyar or some crazy ass other place of people that don't exist anymore. Yeah, the Magyars.
I feel like Sean's as prepared as I was the first time we did this.
Well, you got all these names and these people that don't.
Where are the Magyars from?
They fought them in northern Italy, so I don't even know where they're from.
Oh, maybe they're like Gothic.
I have no idea.
Well, I know around that time the Byzantines were fighting the Goths and the Lombards. It was like the Gothic Wars or something in
Maybe.
Byzantium. Yeah.
I mean, this was the start of the Austro-Hungarian Empire too, with the Habsburgs.
Really?
It just started around here, so who knows who the Magyars were? I don't even know if I'm saying it right, because I don't even know what dialect it's spoken in.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had
The Habsburgs started in the 900s?
it's very close to that time.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it's the
Interesting.
900s. I mean, it's a 1,000-year-old empire,
Wow.
so it
Yeah,
was starting to come together.
Wow. That's crazy.
I think it was the longest running empire up to World War One. I think it was the
I
oldest.
think that
one.
was the Ottomans, actually.
You think so?
The,
They're both really old.
the Ottomans were run by the same dynasty from 1299 to 1920.
Whoa.
Well, that's
The
less
same
than-
the
less than
same
900
line
years.
of sons, unbroken, from Osman.
That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They're the longest running country like ever
Wow.
on planet Earth.
yeah, that's
Unbroken line of sultans from the founder Osman III, who was the original like guy,
Yeah.
which the name Ottoman is derived from, the Osman Turks.
But yeah, we got Pope John X. He just did some stuff, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
But I don't know how this happened, but he was allegedly smothered to death with a pillow. I don't even know who did it. I could not find out.
Well, they covered their tracks good then. If they,
Dude,
no
he
one
got-
saw that's a cold case for 1,000 years. No
Wow.
one's figured that out.
Well, yeah, he didn't. He lasted for
First 48 hours, it's been
This era is just so funny in which you're just like, yep, I don't know.
yeah.
He was Pope for 14 years.
There's a small fact that happened, and we got one line in the history book that says the Pope was killed,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's it.
yeah.
it just happened so long ago.
It's a pretty tough time. I mean, if you look at I was looking at tragic deaths of the popes, and it was all during this time because this is when they lost power.
Yeah, I saw
with
you
the
watching
Franks.
that. It was just list
And they
one
were
after
getting
another.
annihilated, man. Because it was just different noble Italian families
Manipulating
just
the
trying
papacy, yeah.
trying to get in. So you got Pope John VIII from 872 to 882. He was allegedly poisoned and then clubbed to death.
10 years.
So
You got
he,
10 years.
He was poisoned and clubbed to death, the Pope. And then Stephen VII lasted for 1 year. He was strangled to death.
Could you imagine that if the Pope was that important today and just all these like
Yeah.
little old men were just getting fucked up?
Leo V
The
was
fucking
allegedly
mafia.
strangled also, and he lasted for 1 year.
The fucking Sicilians are just beating the popes in alleys and shit.
Yeah. Dude, all these popes were within 50 years
Wow.
murdered.
How
They were
many-
all murdered.
Murdered. Wow.
Murdered.
Pope Benedict VII strangled.
This whole era just seems like a complete shit show. Like 919 seems like a terrible time to be alive.
What's
Yeah.
what is this Pope? What's X?
Yeah, man.
5? Is that
Uh,
Pope
14.
14.
14? Pope John the 14th, either by starvation, ill treatment, or direct murder, was killed.
Direct murder.
Clement,
Not as opposed to passive murder, as opposed to indirect murder.
Clement II died allegedly of poisoned, and that's 1046. He lasted 1 year. 1046. Oh my God.
Yeah, man. Everyone's just fucking fighting each other because there's just the Roman Empire. Think about it. The Roman Empire was around for over 1,000 years, and then it just vanished.
Right.
And it's just like the power vacuum was so big that people are just wrestling.
Yeah,
and so many lives get lost in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds
That's why it's the Dark Ages. It's all violence. There's no security. There's no state.
I don't know.
There's
I think
no
the Roman
state
Empire had that too, though, because when an emperor would die, there was civil wars and stuff. So
all the time.
I mean, they would probably have a better means of getting around it, and they could just go to a safer part of the empire.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think Rome was a pretty wild place.
Well, Rome was, but that's because that's because of Augustus, because Augustus established this whole like cult of the emperor thing that was like, Caesar Augustus, who is the longest reigning emperor ever, I think, and probably the best. He invented a whole philosophy that was like the civic virtues of Rome, and it all centered around like the emperor as, just the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. So there was just this whole imperial cult of the Romans, at least in Italy, and like probably Cisalpine Gaul, that was like, so when the emperor died or when there were power struggles, it was like shit hit the fan because so much was riding on the emperor. So that is interesting. I mean, yeah, Rome went through a lot of upheavals, but I think the far off provinces were probably not as affected. Like the Mediterranean would definitely explode every time an emperor was murdered or something, but I don't know.
I know.
I know. I have a degree.
I know.
I have the internet. Yeah.
That was me. I mean, I looked at some other things, and it was really stupid. So I didn't look at those things anymore.
I thought you did. What about the Byzantines? Didn't you?
I was looking at that a little bit, and then I looked at
what were they doing this time?
I thought the Habsburg Empire was actually more interesting. So I started looking at that more and how they were.
What'd you learn? Because I'm so curious about the Habsburgs.
It was kind of confusing, to be honest. There was
a
lot of stuff going on.
Marriages.
It was right when like Hungary and Austria were starting to form.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just tough because I looked at a map of the time, and all the names are like very foreign.
Right.
So it's hard to relate to.
Right.
To it nowadays. So I just didn't bother. And then I looked at the Pope, and I was like, oh, well, that's not even that well described either, so I'll just go with it. And I like it because they just fucking all got murdered. Like, because you look at it nowadays, and you're like, oh, the Pope, oh, look how kind he is. Oh, that's great. He's been around for 40 years. Like, oh, it's going to be so sad when he dies. Back then, it was like, oh, we gotta fucking kill this one. Get the pillow.
Fuck that Pope.
The 919 Pope got murdered with a pillow.
By probably someone's really close to him. If you're killing him with a pillow, that means you can see him when he's sleeping.
Yeah. Dude, one of the popes in this list of murdered popes was killed by like a predecessor, and apparently the predecessor died of the injuries trying to kill the other pope.
Well, at least that pope could fight back.
Just popes just murdering each other.
Yeah, if you're a pope, you got to know how to fucking use a knife, I guess.
Fucking pope wars.
Yeah.
Well, what you were saying about the Italian nobles backing, I mean, all these nobles who controlled these cities, who would eventually become like, powerful city-states like Verona and
like Venice and Florence.
Genoa.
They're all just like city-states, yeah.
Right, they're all city-states, and they're all controlled by families, essentially.
Yep.
And they would actually, like, they would either through bribes or through actually, like, employing bishops, right? So, like, they would have these agents, the bishops, the whole structure of the papacy, like the Pope and then the bishops and the cardinals and stuff under him, was all fucking corrupted by the influence of these noble Italian families who would essentially buy bishops, and they were essentially just, employees of, like, I don't know, the fucking Medicis or whatever, and then they would say, oh, this pope isn't working out, you go put some poison in his wine, right? So they had direct lines into the pope for forever, and it was always that way. That's what's so interesting about the Catholic Church, in that it's like a political entity. Like, even today, the fact that the Pope has an army, kind of like he has the Swiss Guard, it's weird, right? Like, no, I don't think any other religion, I mean, well, I guess aside from Islam, right? Like, radical Islam is all about, like, militias and shit, but like,
yeah, it's not
as we've experienced.
It's not as well structured, though. So
not that it's about that, but yeah, exactly. It's like this formalized political entity.
Yeah. I mean, now the Pope has his own. It's essentially its own country, right? The Vatican.
Yeah, it is its own country. Well, it used to be the Papal States, which controlled bigger portions of Italy. They controlled all of Rome and the surrounding countries. They even controlled parts of France. They had like little city-states in Provence. Yeah. The Papal States used to be
fight for it.
Huge.
They conquered that.
Yeah, they had their own army. There's even in the 1800s, you can see there's famous, like, writers and stuff who were born in the Papal States, the states controlled by the Pope directly, like militarily, politically. It's crazy. It's really interesting. Italy is a really fascinating place. But yep. Should we sing again? Should we fill the dead air?
I'd like to talk about
hats. Hats?
Yeah.
What about hats?
Well, I really like hats, and when you look at hats throughout history, you can really see how the function of a hat changes depending on. Oh, hey, Brian.
Yeah?
No, things change, and changes are direct.
What kind of hats were they wearing in 919?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, if people fucking were allowed to draw back then we would know. The fucking Pope.
Oh yeah, no one could make art. Draw. Yeah.
So there was like little squiggles of like stick figures with like dicks on their heads, and you're like, oh, that's what they wore for hats.
They were all. What if they were all walking around with half Jacksons, and we just never knew? Just could never know.
That could have happened.
For all we know, it could be possible.
Yeah, this shit's hard, man. We're so long ago, and it's 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
1872 was only like 100 something years ago, so that was a little bit more relatable. This one's like, I don't even know what they wore for hats. I got plenty of hats, and I don't think they wore any of them.
I don't understand cultures whose hats I don't recognize. I
think that's a good step. Yeah,
a good litmus test for historical understanding is hats.
Did they wear fucking leggings or pants? I don't even know. They wore leggings, I think.
Weren't pants? Yeah, that is interesting, because pants were like a Germanic thing, and the Romans thought it was barbaric to wear pants.
I thought it was Turkish.
No, they were the Germans wore leather pants.
No, I don't know about
that.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
I don't know. No, we're actually going back, because the Romans just wore fucking togas and shit. And linen
but
stuff.
But people were wearing leggings where it was like a tube sock, and you pull them up.
In the 900s?
Pretty sure, yeah.
Sounds nice.
And we don't even know what they wore for underwear. It could have just been nothing, because there's no. How the fuck are you gonna know? There's like two illustrations that are slightly helpful.
I feel like in 919 people were just shitting their pants constantly.
They didn't have any pants to shit in. They were just they had their leggings and they
shitting on
bring
the
up
ground.
their man skirt, and they're like, oh, I'm just going in the fucking road, just like an Indian, shitting in a road.
I was thinking about that as I was researching. I'm like, these people are just eating rotten food and like
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
bread all day.
Let's talk about the diet of 919.
And they're drinking fucking tepid water, and it's like these people must be
they
so
had to
sick.
just drink alcohol because all the
They must
water
be
is
so
shit.
sick all the time.
Yeah, they must have been miserable.
They must have constantly had colds and like diarrhea, and were just like fucked up.
Well, I mean,
Like now it's like
wasn't a part
now
of
it's
it,
like
so.
you eat something like you eat some like deli meat that's like a day older than it should be, and you're like, I'm gonna take the chance. I'm really hungry. I'm gonna make a sandwich, and then you're like, oh,
I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten since breakfast.
Yeah. I haven't eaten in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I guess I'll eat some of this pastrami. It's like not quite what it should be. And then a little later, your poop is a little soft and your stomach's kind of bloated, and you're like, I shouldn't have done that. Imagine a time when you and your family are starving and you're just eating fucking dead crows. And you're like, oh, thank God for this.
Yeah,
And then you just and then you're just blowing fucking feces out of your butthole
And then just
all over.
throwing it in the streets.
And
No, they wouldn't have streets yet. They just be like, oh, yeah, feed the cows.
you're just fucking shitting diarrhea all over your cows.
All right. Well, do you want to hear about China in 919?
I guess.
China, I think, was doing much better in
right.
919
Dude, I did.
than Europe was.
I did
Europe
look up
was fucked.
something. There was a really good artist in
Oh,
China
yeah?
during that time.
Tell me about him.
He was so good that he was being like plagiarized.
Huh.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Huh.
I saw some of his shit on Wikipedia, and it was nice. It looks just like modern, fucking Chinese shit.
Is it like the really flat kind of like
Mountain landscapes.
mountain landscapes?
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was cool.
China was kicking ass,
And that
man.
was it. And the rest of it I thought was dumb.
So China in 919 was also like a weird transitionary period. So the thing that I found was there's this battle that happened. Give me your phone. Get
no
rid of that.
phone
You don't need
policy.
that.
No,
You don't need that.
Stop getting distracted.
What are
by
you
it.
doing?
Why are you so
Oh.
defensive?
Because you're not listening.
I am listening. There was a weird battle that happened.
No.
Ryan, I'm so
Zach
smart.
spoke. Now he gets to just ignore
I
all
know.
the
This is the
rest.
thing. This is the thing. Get your. You don't need to text people during
I'm
the
not
podcast.
texting people.
What are you doing? You're on
I'm
Instagram.
publicizing us.
Get the fuck out of here.
You're making it an issue.
It is an issue
It's not an issue.
to me.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. All right. So there's a battle. It's the Battle of Longshanjian, which is the Battle of Wolf Mountain River.
Wow.
Oh, so
There's
interesting.
wolves in China. Tell me about these Chinese
I hate
wolves,
you
Brian.
two so much. I hate all of you.
I'm Brian. I looked up a battle that happened. Are you listening to me?
My name's Zach, and I'm going to tell you about 400 AD.
I'm going to tell you about 500 years of history
I'm,
and then text when the next person starts talking.
Yeah, well, I just
Oh.
I feel really insecure
I like your
about my
notes.
position at the table
don't you show the camera
because
your
I'm
notes?
not a good singer. Yeah, check out my notes. We got
Ooh, Pope
Yeah, what do your
fossils.
notes say?
papal vassals.
Great.
And a squiggle.
And
What's that?
well, I'm getting ready to take notes on China so
All right.
Brian can see that I'm listening. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Wolf
Thank you.
River Mountain.
Wolf Mountain River. Get it straight.
Wolf Mountain.
Wolf Mountain River Valley Forest.
Wolf Mountain River. There it is.
Thank you. Thank
There
you.
it is.
Why don't you get us some
talking
more
right into the
peanuts?
camera.
Peanut M&Ms.
I already ate all the peanut M&Ms. I'm still drinking whiskey though.
I don't know why phones make me so angry.
They make you so angry.
I see people I don't like not being listened to, especially in the context of this. This is like the whole point of this is so we can talk to each other.
No, listen. The only reason I looked is because I posted about this show. Shut the fuck up. Can you shut up for 5 minutes?
5 minutes is way too long to ask for.
No, I posted about.
Did you just put spit in your fucking? Whoa, that's a spittoon, wasn't it?
It's ice. No, it's not a spittoon.
Did you spit in that?
We're not chewing. We're not doing dip right now.
Doesn't matter putting alcohol in it, so
All
now
right,
it's
there
okay.
We
you go.
could be. We could get Josh Fournier on this show, and he could be our intern who just gives us chewing tobacco. More for you.
Let the
No.
man speak.
No. I just wanted to
Look at
say.
What are you trying to say?
The show's falling apart.
Yeah, that's fine. What are you trying to say?
No, I was just saying that I posted.
Off, Jason, stop texting me.
Oh, my phone.
I'm trying to just get it out of my face. I'm not. Do you see the difference between me just shutting it down versus
You see a difference?
We're fighting.
We're always fighting.
Yep.
919, 9919, 9919, 9919,
Stop it!
9919.
This is
on,
part of the drama of
Brian.
the show. All right.
There's an unexpected conflict in the middle of episode 2. No,
Every
listen.
episode's gonna have
No, I
this.
just wanted to bring it up. I posted about this, and I got like more. Like the only reason I looked at my phone is because it was blowing up. So many people like this podcast.
Hey, we're blowing up.
I just wanted to show
Let
you.
the man
so many
speak.
people love this podcast. Maker's Mark, sponsor us. At least 30 people are paying attention.
All right. So 919. You guys were fucking real racist, just only talking about white people in Europe. I want to let you know.
Well, maybe if
Real
Chinese people were more
Eurocentric.
interesting,
Yeah.
I would have looked them up.
So China, it's this era called the Five Kingdom. The Five Dynasties, 10 Kingdom era, because it's this era in between dynasties. So there's a dynasty called the Tang Dynasty that falls in 907, and there's a dynasty called the Song Dynasty that rises in 960. And there's about 5 different dynasties that quickly change in this era, between 10 kingdoms that are constantly fighting against each other. So it's this like really kind of all over the place era, and two of these 10 dynasties, fuck you.
What's so funny? Tang, that's your note.
You're an idiot. Thank you.
But then
2 of the 10 dynasties are called the Wu and the Wu Yu. Unfortunately, they're super closely named, and so I'm gonna get them all.
all right, write that down.
Hey, fuck the Wu.
Wu Tang.
Wu Tang.
Oh, what about the Wu
the
Tang?
Wu Tang dynasty.
Shit, this is already better than everything that Zach talked about.
So, so the Tang dynasty falls in 907 because there's like a bunch of rebellions happening in which just like instability is happening, similar to the fall of Rome. It's this fall of a dynasty. Different military. There's these military governors in each era that are happening, that like are in control of each era, and like with the instability that's happening, each place gets like given, each of these military governors are given more power. And one of those military governors is this guy named Zhou Wen. And he essentially gets more power because he's kind of this like critical role in suppressing one of the rebellions. And the emperor is like, oh, Zhou Wen, great job. And just hands him like a title. And he pretty much immediately is just like, yeah, I'm the emperor now. And sends assassins. He gets,
Give me them Chinese.
so he gets this title of like military governor, and pretty much immediately sends assassins to the emperor's house. The assassins kill the emperor, and the like story that he has is that like at first he says like, oh, it was the concubines of the emperor who killed him, who are like the kind of ladies of the house who are not the emperor's wife. And then he essentially just completely
whores.
Yeah,
It was not me. It was the it was those women.
Yep.
It wasn't me.
Yep.
Very,
Okay.
very accurate representation.
Very
I did not do it.
We
It
have a
was the
historical
women.
reenactor in the house.
very racist. Very not okay
Well,
to
I'm
do.
trying to get into the history of it.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Brian is going to have to actually do some editing on this.
No,
Wow.
you're not getting edited out. That's a rule of this podcast, is there are
Yeah.
no edits, and I don't take shit out. And if you're racist, that's your problem.
Racist? Are you? Wow, you guys are little babies.
We just lost half of our support for
No,
this show.
no, we didn't.
Oh yeah, all the Chinamen are watching this. That's for sure.
Sean's just our bad boy.
Yeah.
He's our bad boy.
Well, after I listen to this fucker for an hour drinking whiskey quietly, I'm gonna get drunk. So
Well, did you think my story wasn't interesting?
no, it was interesting.
Okay, then fuck off.
all right. Well, then
Oh,
what's
yeah,
the
Shut up.
problem?
Hey, shut up. It's my turn. I'm last. You're all drunk, and so am I. So shut up.
I'm not drunk. Sean's drunk.
All right.
And a racist.
A race.
Calm down.
Wow.
Calm down. We're not having this conversation.
Making
We're
different
talk-
voices is racist.
Shut up. We're talking about me. All right.
Talking about Brian. All right.
So all right.
We're
So,
always talking about.
all right.
Anyway,
So all right. So this guy sends assassins to the emperor's house. He blames it on the concubines at first, and then he blames it on these two other guys who were just names that meant nothing to me, and he forces them to commit suicide.
what?
Whoa.
How do you do that?
Not sure. That's what it said.
Hey, you.
How do you smother a pope with a pillow?
Hey, well, that makes more sense. Just say, hey, kill yourself.
Yeah. I don't know what that meant.
Come on.
Well,
do
here's
it.
the thing.
You
Well, here's the
coward.
thing. These guys are willing to do a lot of shit over there in China because the servants of the Chinese emperor, I don't know what year it was, but they'd fucking castrate. They'd get castrated. They'd be fucking
The servants would be.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That,
So they
that was
couldn't
a show
fuck
here.
his ladies?
Yeah, that'd be ultimate. That'd be the ultimate sacrifice, and then you live like a fucking awesome
Yeah.
because you're living in the royal emperor's fucking
House.
palace.
It's the best, but
but you have no dick.
yeah.
That's
And
the
I
sacrifice
thought that was really
you make.
interesting. Yeah,
That's
I don't
the
know what year that
sacrifice
is.
you make to live in security and comfort. is
Exactly,
You just
yeah.
chop your dick off. You're
Yeah.
like, man, I could live out in the fucking.
What do they call them? Eunuchs? Is that what they're called?
castrados? Oh, eunuch.
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 Okay.
Castrados are like boys who get their balls chopped off to be better singers, like
Yeah,
to be higher
yeah,
level singers.
What? That's a
Yeah.
thing?
That's
High
an
tone
Italian
singers,
thing, yeah.
you get your balls chopped off prepubescent, and your voice never deepens,
What?
and you become
Never heard
whatever
about
like a high level a soprano, tenor. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's
But like
horrifying.
the high pitched singer.
Is it though? They had better music than we have now because of that. Go on, Brian.
Anyhow, so this guy forces these random people, like not random to history, but random to me, people to commit suicide. They become the official like blame story of like why the emperor died. And Zhou Wen puts his 13-year-old son in charge of the emperor.
Good move.
And then 3 years later, just decides he's like, actually, I want to be emperor.
Yeah.
And essentially like usurps his 13-year-old son and is just like, yeah, I'm in charge.
Oh, that's just not nice.
Yeah, it's
You think he'd still be able to control though through him?
you'd think, but he's just like, yeah,
Because
not enough.
Nero's mother tried to do that,
Huh.
and that didn't work out well. But all right, hey.
So this is three emperors later. It's like 919 is like early into this era. It's like the first of the 5 dynasties. It's called the later Jiayang.
That doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean the problem with this era
That's
is
trouble.
that like
Yeah, it's
so many
trouble.
names don't
Yeah.
mean anything to you. So many nations don't mean anything to you. Literally, I know of the Wu because of Dynasty Warriors. Like,
I was waiting for
Yeah.
it. Hell yeah.
I know about the Wu because of Dynasty Warriors. The Wu Yu is like so.
Wait, does Dynasty Warriors take place in this period?
Dynasty Warriors is later,
Okay.
but the Wu is like a long-lived nation.
Okay.
And so the Wu is this like really old nation that's kind of like bigger than the Wu Yu, but the Wu Yu is kind of cool because they are like known for their like science and learning. You know, they're known as this like technologically superior nation, whereas the Wu is kind of like bigger and older. And so Zhou Wen, who is the warlord I was just talking about, his 4th son is emperor in 919. He's the last emperor of the later Jiayang, and so he's the emperor that fucks up, and then the next dynasty starts. And so he tells the prince.
What does he fuck up? Wait, the 13-year-old?
No. So
Yes.
I'm still on that.
okay, here.
Yeah.
Look,
yeah.
So Zhou Wen is the warlord who gets the emperor, the last emperor of the Tang dynasty killed, and so at the end of the Tang dynasty starts this like era of like instability, and the first era of that is called the later Jiayang period, and that's ruled by this guy Zhou Wen, and the 3rd emperor in that kind of like short dynasty is the emperor in 919. He's the 4th son of this guy who went off and had the emperor killed and just like took power. So I don't remember his name. Sorry, his name is Zhou Zhen. So son of this warlord, Zhou Zhen essentially orders this prince of the Wu Yu, which is this smaller nation, to go attack the Wu force. Are we following this so far? lot of names and a lot of nations that we're not familiar with. But so the gist of it is, the smaller, technologically superior nation goes and attacks a larger, older, more traditional nation.
Okay.
Ordered by the emperor of the general, like, larger empire. Right?
The general, like, Chinese.
So there's like
empire.
there's this whole area that is controlled by the empire, but within that there are these kind of competing dynasties and competing families.
Gotcha.
So the general emperor tells, like, one of the, like, princes essentially to go attack another one of the princes.
Gotcha. He wants to take down Wu.
Right.
Why?
He wants to kind of, like, I don't know why. And nowhere I found said why.
Just politicking.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think he just wanted to, like, kind of take down a bigger power and knew that this kind of, like, smaller, technologically superior power could fuck with them. So it's a battle on the. This is a naval battle. It's only ships. Whoa. It's only on the river. It's on the Yangtze River.
Whoa.
It's just north of modern day Shanghai.
Wow.
So there's this, like, Wolf Mountain is this, like, weird ass, like geological feature. So it must have been, like, right at the base of this big ass mountain.
That looks like a wolf?
It doesn't look like a wolf. It just looks like a big clump of rock
stuff. Yeah.
It's a shame.
So the Wu Yu prince is ordered by the emperor to take 500 dragon ships. And we're not really sure what dragon ships are, but dragon ships at the time could have been what were called dragon boats, which were these, like, essentially, like, canoes that had, like, big canoes that, like, were rowable. The funny thing is, if you look at this
like
era,
triremes.
I don't know what a trireme is.
It's like the Mediterranean ship with the ram.
Yeah, actually similar. So they're huge, like, rowable ships. The funny thing is, if you look at a lot of these, like, the cool thing is that about like 200 years later, there's an emperor that decides to make a log of all of the military technology of known at the time, and so there's like illustrations of all of the ships that they know that exist, and so you can see kind of some of these ships. They don't look like they should. They're like way too squat. I mean, they don't really know how to draw proportion at the time, so, like, the ships don't look quite right. But you can kind of get a sense of what they look like.
Just as an aside, briefly, that must have been... It's interesting to think that there was one emperor who's like, it might be a good idea to, like, catalog all this stuff. Because it's like, it's crazy to think that you are fighting and struggling for so much and building power and building all this stuff. And you don't know, like, just over those mountains, there could be guys with fucking shit you've never seen before. Yeah. And you're like... And then they come over, like the... when the Byzantines had Greek fire, and you're just like, oh my god, that ship is shooting fire at us. How the
glad
fuck are
you
they doing
Greek
that?
fire?
Oh, is it coming in?
So
oh yeah,
glad.
919, 919, 919.
Wow.
Okay, shut up.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Hey. So this is the
hazards of telling your story last.
I know
everyone is drunk on whiskey.
So this emperor makes this book, and we kind of know about everything that they were doing at the time because he kept losing, and so he's just like wanted to have this book that he sent off to all his generals and be like,
fuck?
hey,
everyone else has all
this is how
stuff.
all, like, we have this technology. Don't fucking not use it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it's a river battle on the Yangtze between the Wu and the Wu Yu. It's 500 ships, about 500 ships. So it's an equal force fighting each other.
Yeah.
We're not really sure what dragon boats are, but, like, imagine that they're like big rowable ships with decks. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if they have sails or not. But
if
like
they're river boats, they probably don't need them.
They probably don't have sails. They're probably just like big ships rowed by a bunch of men with big long oars.
Mm-hmm. Were they ramming ships or were they trying to like board each other?
So were they the flame shooters?
So this is the first time ever in which flamethrowers are used in combat.
Whoa.
Documented. Cool. So Greek fire existed before this, but Greek fire wasn't exactly a flamethrower. Like we're not really sure what Greek fire was.
That's crazy that we don't know.
We're not really sure.
Well, Greek fire involved some sort of oil base, and it was a fire that was able to burn on top of water.
Right.
And they don't know what the actual recipe was, but they could have shot it out of some sort of like tube, or they could have put them in jars and thrown it.
It's like the Game of Thrones super weapon that they use in that when the Battle of Blackwater.
So
Bay.
let me describe this naval battle to you. It's 500 ships versus 500 ships on the Yangtze River. The Wu Yu take the upwind position with their fleet, scatter ashes into the air to blind the other ships so that they can get really, really close. They've covered their own decks with sand, and then they throw beans onto the other decks, on the decks of the other ships. They're so close that they can throw beans onto the other ships.
Beans?
Beans. Literally, like hard beans.
Fucking throwing like marshmallows?
Essentially like these things, like M&Ms all over the other ships so that the people can't move very well.
What?
And they're
slipping around.
And their secret weapon,
beans.
Their secret weapon is this new technology that is a flamethrower, essentially. So they've combined two techs that they have that nobody else has, which is a double pump,
Wu Yu has.
Wu Yu.
The technology.
The technology
Gotcha.
state. They have it's a double piston pump. So that when you push in, it pumps, and when you pull out, it also pumps.
Whoa.
So it pushes on both ends of your pumping action, and they're also using gunpowder as a slow-burning fuse. So imagine a big canister. Do I need to... No, I got 2 more minutes.
I don't know what that buzz was, but...
It's a big canister of fuel of some sort, which they called fierce fire oil.
Whoa.
It's an oil similar to Greek fire that couldn't be put out by water, and it burned it was like petroleum of some sort that they like harvested from the rocks. They're not really sure what it was, but they described it as taking it from the rocks, and they called it there was like some name that I didn't write down, but like the English translation is fierce fire oil. And there was so imagine a box, and on top of it was like a big tube. And when you pumped the back of that tube, it sprayed flame, like petrol onto it, like a modern flamethrower, and it would just shoot fire.
Whoa. So they had like a torch in front of the sprayer?
They had instead of having a candle, they used gunpowder. So it combined two of their techs, which was gunpowder and this double pump system. And when they pumped it, and I've seen videos of it on YouTube of them recreating it, and when you really got it going, it was just like, and they got close, and they just burned these other ships.
What the?
And so,
and then they lost.
No, they fucking destroyed them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
Yeah, so they destroyed 400 of the 500 other ships and took 7,000 prisoners.
What a loss.
It was a complete disaster for the Wu, and it was a complete victory for the Wu Yu.
Shit.
First experience of flamethrower technology ever being used.
That's unbelievable. I love learning about ancient Chinese warfare because they're so wily. Like, it's all fucking the art of war, like deception and tricks, like throwing the beans on.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't do that in Europe. They just lined up in rows and fucking murdered each other.
Just fired at each other.
Yeah. The Chinese are like always like scheming. It's so cool.
I mean, it's crazy to just
and using
imagine.
like crazy technology and stuff. It's so neat.
It's I mean, like, I was just listening to like Dan Carlin's Blueprint for Armageddon, having these like talking about how amazing it is, how far away they could be shooting these like gigantic rounds 18 miles away over the curvature of the earth. Like, that's our modern sense of warfare on the seas. These guys are eye to eye. It's like still eye to eye on ships. They're getting so close that they can throw beans at each other.
Yeah.
And that these flamethrowers can only shoot like 10 feet. They're like literally like ramming their boats onto like the side and just
burning them. That's crazy.
And they're like beans on the deck so that the guys can't jump into the water as quickly.
Oh my God.
That's the point of the beans is so that they fucking roast more people.
That's crazy.
And so that when they jump into the water, they can that they're just completely fucked.
That is devious. How did they not catch their own boats on fire if they're that close? Did they lose some ships too?
I mean,
they must have.
It's throwing fire, I mean,
Right.
and then maybe they row back. I mean, maybe they're just.
There must be.
I'm not sure, but
that's crazy. It's just it's so wild to me always that there's just stuff that like was a given fact of the medieval or even ancient world that we just don't even know. Like we don't even understand it. Like the fact that we don't know what that shit was made of. I mean, it could have just been oil. Like oil was just coming up out of the ground back then.
Yeah.
Because no one was harvesting it. So they could have just been like, oh, what's this black shit? Oh, someone threw a match on it and they're like, wait, oh, ding. That could be used. Like, right? Like,
this book that
just get
emperor,
jars of that shit.
This book that emperor made had 3 different recipes for fierce fire oil and gunpowder that are like different versions of what they could have had.
The Chinese had gunpowder.
Yeah.
In the 900s.
So it was also they talked about gunpowder as being a it was like a drug. I'm not sure why, but for some reason they talked about it in some way that was
probably
like,
eating it.
I'm not sure what they were doing with it, but they didn't think of it as like a violent thing.
They used to make tea.
Until this battle. This
They
is the
used to
first
make
time
tea with gunpowder.
But this is the first time gunpowder is used in a combative way, and it's not even used as an explosive. It's used as a spark for fuel. Like they're using it as the like candle that lights. It's essentially hairspray plus a lighter.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but a very like big like rudimentary sense of that.
Yeah, wow.
And they're using gunpowder as the lighter and this double pump action as the hairspray.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's all right.
No. Was that it?
That's all I got.
That's your story.
That's my story.
That's cool. The first ever flamethrower.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm pulling up our dice roll unless you guys have anything else.
I think that was a good ep. What how much time did we log in on that?
This is about 2 hours.
Nice. The first one was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
We're probably about an hour and a half because I think we've been recording for longer than we started the conversation.
That was awesome, guys. Well done.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I learned so much about the 900s.
So, as you know, our first 2 digits are rolled by a D20.
Okay.
And I'm going to roll one right now. And we got 13.
Oh, good year.
And 39.
Ooh.
1339 is our next year, boys.
1339.
That's
1339.
like the Renaissance almost.
1339.
Oh,
1339.
I can't wait. 1339 is going to be good.
Yeah, there's actually fucking recorded shit I can read from that.
1339. 1339. What?
All right, guys.
Breaking my mic.
And we're out. Bye-bye.